record to the cloud. And I don't know whether this is, I've got to check my syllabus, what the heck week, it's probably week 3, module 4. Does that sound right to everybody? So as we condense this course to 13 weeks due to the pandemic, worried about the pandemic, stretching in this coming year. So they enabled us to have some options in our classes. Whether these options will remain permanent or not is yet to be determined. But I took advantage of it. But that makes the weeks kind of funny, We're going through the 4th module now on ISD models. I thought we'd bring in someone who's working in an environment that relies on instructional design, techniques, theory, models, and so forth. Maybe not one, maybe several, maybe not explicitly, maybe implicitly. Maybe it's in a state of change or flux, or maybe it's being debated. We don't know. So that's what we'll talk to Rachel about. Rachel is actually just like you. So we're bringing someone who's in a similar ZPD, zone of proximal development, this week. And we'll get to Vygotsky later in the semester, and we'll let Vygotsky influence my dissertation. We'll talk a bit about his work in getting people to think about potential as opposed to fossilized skills. One's on the cusp of what one can learn, as opposed to what one already has learned, or what one can learn with others. And in part, we have these synchronous sessions because we are learning with others along the way, including today. And so today we're going to have an hour or so chat with Rachel. Did you say Koblic? Is that close?
It's actually Koblitz.
Koblitz?
Yeah.
Okay, like a TZ on the end or an X?
Exactly. Like a TZ.
Koblitz. Okay. What is that, from a certain part of a country somewhere where they have Koblitzes?
Yeah, it's Czech. My dad was born and raised in Prague.
Yeah, I thought maybe Poland or Eastern European, but it's Czech. Yeah, that makes sense. So we're gonna talk about 2U, where Rachel's been working for several years, I imagine, and it's been going through a serious acquisition phase, which will be kind of interesting for us to talk about. And after break, we'll talk about Gagne's model. We'll talk about David Merrill's models of instructional design. We'll talk about my learning environment approach to instructional design last. And if you're in my R546 on Saturdays, you can skip it because I talked about it in there in week 1. So I'm not sure if anyone is in my 546 class here. Yeah, I thought so. Okay. So, you can go hang out at the San Diego ballpark somewhere, catch a baseball game at that point. They're back in the playoff hunt. Robert. And Robert, do you like Robert or Bob?
Call me Bob. My mother calls me Robert when she's angry, and so there's a Pavlovian kind of thing. But I just want to say thank you for letting me eavesdrop. I'll intrude no more, but I'm in 540 and you let me eavesdrop here, so I appreciate
that's right. We sent you the 511 as a special express. Shushi and I, yeah, we both did. Rebecca's already talked. Aaron's already talked. Mark, you want to say hi? Mark?
Sorry, I have some computer issues over here. Hello, excited to learn a little bit more about this ISD in the business world.
Yeah, well, maybe if Rachel's willing, we'll hear a little bit about 2U spending $800 million to buy EDX. And so, yeah, thank you. Claudio is coming from Texas, right?
That's right, yes.
Austin, Texas? Dallas, Texas, that's right.
Yes.
And
Very
Sarah, what's that?
Very excited to be here tonight, even though I'm having some trouble with the camera, but I'll be here.
Well, I'm glad you have a tie, so I'm not the only one. I ran up. Rachel said her colleague might be coming tonight, so I had to quick put on a tie. Is your colleague here yet, Rachel?
Yeah, Josh is waving at you.
Josh, oh, there you are. Okay. Josh doesn't have a tie on, then I don't have to have a tie on.
Josh is also
So-
in Colorado, so nearby Rebecca in Denver.
Okay. So she's in Colorado Springs, you're in Denver, so we got a Rocky Mountain High with us tonight. And we won't go much further with that because in Indiana, we could get arrested still. Sarah's with us, and Sarah, are you in Bloomington or Florida?
I am in Bloomington, but my background is just Florida.
That's what I
It's
thought.
nicer. Yeah.
And what part of Bloomington are you in?
I'm on the east side.
East side, okay, probably not far from me. Maybe I'll go run by there every once in a while. Nelson, where are you from, Nelson?
Hey, how's it going? From Los Angeles, but I'm living in Bloomington right now.
Oh, okay. Is it temporary in Bloomington, or do you think it's gonna be permanent?
Just for this master's program, and then afterwards, I'm not sure. We'll see where I guess fate takes us.
Right. Well, welcome. And we got Patrick. Patrick, where are you coming from?
Hey, Professor Bonk. I'm commuting home right now. I'm in New York. But thanks again for letting me sit in. Hi, Rachel. And hi, everyone.
Hi,
Are you
Pat.
from New York or are you from somewhere else?
I'm from New York, from a small county, Rockland, New York, which is a little bit northwest of New York City.
Well, some of you then apparently know Rachel and have had her in class. So this is her chance to sit and shine and go on a pedestal. I didn't have her submit a bio to us, so we're going to talk through her bio and in effect have her introduce herself to us. And you know, she's, I think, maybe in the past year moved to a part of New York, Saratoga Springs, I believe, during the
true.
pandemic. Was that just pandemic related move, or was it related to working at 2U that they suggested you move to Saratoga Springs?
No, so I had spent the last 15 years in New York City and had always thought about moving out. I grew up in British Columbia, which is much kind of closer to this type of environment. And so pandemic accelerated that decision, I guess.
Well, British Columbia is a lovely place. Upstate New York is as well. So welcome in and to joining us. For you have not been in this field 15 years. How long have you been in the field, and what got you interested in the educational technology / learning design field?
Yeah, so I have been at 2U for just under 6 years. Prior to that, I have kind of an eclectic background in a lot of different things. So I worked at a hedge fund doing on-campus recruiting for 5 years. I worked at a wine school doing a lot of different things, including teaching and curriculum development type stuff for 5 years as well. I spent some time doing operations at a communications consultancy. So I've been all over. I got into 2U through the founding COO, who's a guy by the name of Rob Cohen. He was an alumnus of the same school as I am. And when I talked to him, he was like, you know, I think you have kind of the raw materials that would be interesting in this particular role in this learning design field. And I had some knowledge of teaching and learning and design and that kind of stuff from some of my prior roles. And then here I am 6 years later.
Why would you leave a wine school?
It's a good question. Very good question.
So, you know, we were talking yesterday as a department about skills and competencies needed within the field and how it's changing rapidly. And at the end of the semester, we're going to read 3 or 4 articles from Albert Ritzhoff at the University of Florida, who has studied the competencies needed and how it's changed over time, and has a competency scale, in fact, working with, he's at the University of Florida, working with Florence Martin at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And so, you know, I'm reading these reports on the future of work, and a number of projected job titles revolve around this field. I think one of the top 10 jobs in government is like a manager of online learning programs and other things that, you know, that talk about the need for the skills in this field. What would be 5 or 10 skills that you see at 2U or at other places that are critical skills that one needs to be successful?
That's a good question. So, and I was thinking a little bit about this before coming here. The first one I would put on the list is problem solving. The reality of this field is that it is changing incredibly quickly, and nobody has the answers. So we have to be able to come up with the answers ourselves. And it occurs to me that as learning designers and going through this program, like, this is giving us the foundation we need to be really successful, problem solving in all areas of our lives, not just in learning scenarios. I'm in 621 right now, which is all about the needs analysis and kind of understanding the problem and diagnosing that in your situation and coming up with a solution based on that need. And that, like, in my work, that's what I need to do, is like really break down the situation, figure out what the problem is, and then generate solutions. So problem solving. I think creativity is a really big one. Being able to kind of think divergently about different solutions. This field, online education that I'm in, will continue to evolve into new frontiers. And so I think the more that you can think creatively and differently, the more successful you will be in kind of pushing the industry forward.
Describe a success that you've had, that you're surprised and very delighted with the solution that you had. Give an example of some project that you've worked on that your people like that your colleague here were surprised. Josh, you can jump in and add to that. But
surprised that I was surprised by the solution.
Yeah, that wasn't a solution you originally had in mind, but as you worked through the project, if something else came up and you tried it out and it worked.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like a good example of this, we're working on a project right now where we haven't quite gotten to the final solution, but I do think the final solution is going to be different than what we initially thought it was. I have a presentation that I'll share some of these details, but like, we need to shrink the timeline it takes us to design courses. And to do that, we need to kind of templatize some of the way that we work, or we need to pre-design. And so we're seeking efficiency, but we want to maintain quality. So the things that we pre-design need to incorporate the principles of learning science and best practices in design. I think we sort of imagine these being a particular thing. And as we have talked through it as a group of about 12 or 15 people, we've really kind of like crunched through, okay, like what are we trying to accomplish here? What is the purpose of this thing? What does it look like? Testing out different things and working in that direction. And I actually think they're going to turn out to be slightly different than what we thought. I know that's a little abstract because you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, but
I do sort of, and it may not be directly related, but way back in the day when online learning is first, getting ramped up for many places, I attended in Vancouver. You're probably there at the time. No, I take that back. It was in Seattle. I went up to Vancouver during the conference because I have friends at Simon Fraser. In 1999, I was part of a symposium run by Betty Collis in the Netherlands, and the area that we were working on, and with pedagogy of online. And Vanessa Denon, my former student now at Florida State, and I wrote a paper afterwards. I think it was called "With a Little Help from My Pedagogical Friends," kind of like an old Beatles song, "With a Little Help from My Friends." But I took that another step further the following year at a conference. I don't know where that was being held. Maybe it was Colorado in Denver. I talked to Blackboard people about my idea of having templates that you just talked about, and having these templates for critical thinking techniques, which Robert, Bob, we have in the Saturday class. So critical thinking could be a debate or some kind of role play or whatever, and whatever kind of a comparison and contrast, a Venn diagram, mind map. Then we have another templates for creativities. Whether it's some kind of free writing activity or brainstorming or something else, and then a whole set of templates for teamwork and collaboration activities, and maybe motivation. So I had these templates in mind, and I talked to these Blackboard people about designing those and putting them within Blackboard. Wouldn't it be great to actually have these learning management systems be geared for active and engaging learning? And you know what their reply was to me? why don't you, we have this building blocks in Blackboard. Why don't you design that and put it in our building blocks? Basically saying, oh, you know, we're not going to give you any money, but you can build this for us and we'll go and sell it later, you know. That was basically the basic reply, you know. And so 20 years fast forward now, 21, 22 years later, and people like, you know, at 2U are thinking this template idea is not a bad one. It could speed up, make it, the process more efficient, and actually might help the people that are users, the stakeholders, see that there's some kind of activeness within an engagement within the process. And we're building this engagement in. It can be a sell feature. So Josh was going to jump in a couple times. You want to expand on any of this?
No, just more exuberant nodding to all the yeses. How these ideas both recycle and add nuance every time they come up, right? Because you know, as to Rachel's point, I mean, you know, to give her kudos, when I joined the team 2 years ago, this was a discussion. So we are recycling ideas now, but every time we recycle them, it adds nuance to the conversation in a way that like makes it more real and also makes it better, you know, I think. So yeah, just nodding in agreement.
Education is an incremental change process, always been incremental, and we recycle back through and in an iterative process, and gradually over time, maybe things do improve, just not at this pace in which we would hope. The pandemic, however, has caused some people to pace a little bit faster than the past, and people saying they won't put up with the way things were anymore. So Rachel, is your template idea similar to the one I was discussing, or was it a different kind of idea?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's very, very similar. And, you know, what we're trying to make sure is that the templates are flexible, because the last thing we want to do, like we already have a rep in the industry of like big, bad corporate 2U trying to like, you know, do bad things to education, like don't care about quality, don't care about effectiveness. So we want to make sure the templates we want to design have got to be really deeply flexible. And we have to be able to swap things out and be responsive to the courses that we're actually designing and the professors that we're actually working with. So we're trying to like figure out how to make it. Do you remember those like toys that you had that were, it was like, I feel like I had a Barbie one that had like the top that was a head and like the bottom that was like a skirt, and then like the middle, and you could like swap out the shirt and swap out the bottoms and swap out the shoes. Like, so we're trying to make it like a modular type template that has deep flexibility, but also gives us what we need as a major company to manage our finances and also manage our production resources and figure out how we're going to make all of this stuff that we're designing.
If you templatize learning and instruction, does that then call for a different skill set and the part of the instructional design team than what they had in the past?
I think it emphasizes the need for creativity, because, you know, what templatizing does is it allows you to really focus your attentions on the opportunities and the opportunities to be creative and have the most impact on student, right? Like what we're doing right now is we design each lecture, each question, like boring piece by boring piece that we could easily templatize and be deeply effective, and then really kind of spend our smart designer brains on the places where we could do really innovative and cool things.
So name a couple innovative and cool things that you've seen during the 3+ years that you've been part of 2U. So what makes 2U distinct? You know, so what? Just a couple that's distinctive from someone else out there.
Sure. I don't know if you can hear the torrential rain in my background, but it's like I just got hit with like a tornado or something. So apologies.
We can't hear it. And if you get cut off, we're just going to ask questions of Josh, so he doesn't mind.
Yeah, this is wild. Hopefully it chills out in a little bit here. But so I think that one of the things that 2U does really well, and no surprise, is media production and like video production. Our CEO, Chip Pausek, comes from a media background. He was the CEO of like Hooked on Phonics and like had some educational TV shows. So when he started the company, it started with a heavy emphasis on video production. So we create some beautiful and incredible videos. And so we've used that in a lot of interesting ways to like create scenarios that students can respond to. I'll tell you a little bit about like the way that we conceptualize delivery, which is a little bit different than a lot of online programs. We don't just do like, read these 3 articles and contribute to this discussion forum and then show up to class. We actually carve out like a small section that's like, 60 minutes to 120 minutes of really intentionally sequenced events. It could be like a video and a question and a video and a question and a discussion forum and an activity, but we kind of like put the student through this guided pathway. So I think that's interesting. Josh has worked on a project recently where we created a virtual fieldwork experience to replace placement hours in a social work program. So during the pandemic, students couldn't go to their placements and they couldn't get placement hours towards their social work degrees. And so we created a course that has been accredited as replacing placement hours, where actors will come to live sessions and they'll be able to practice their social work skills with those actors. And then the async is like very high fidelity, realistic video scenario presentation where you kind of like follow a fake case social work agency and the people who are work there and the clients who go there throughout your whole course, and you kind of get that experience there.
Do you have any sense of just offhand, the numbers of clients that you have?
Yeah, so we have I think we have more than 100 university partners at this point. And, to clarify, so the company started in 2008. It went public in 2014. In 2017, we acquired a company called Get Smarter, which does short courses. And then in 2019, we acquired a company called Trilogy that does boot camps. And so those 100 partners we work with in different ways. I work specifically on the degree program side with some interaction with the others, but there are also teams that develop the short courses, that develop the boot camps. And so our 100 partners are like collectively between us. We have about 100 university partners.
I remember the announcements for each of those, and as you've grown, it's getting more and more attention. So you're in charge at the program level as opposed to the course level, or both?
So we work with degree program partners, so partners who are looking to create online degree programs. My team is structured, I have 4 teams below me, and they're specified by discipline. So somebody's focused on like business and technology, health sciences, Josh's education and social work, and then somebody else in another field. The leaders of those teams work at the program level. So they'll work with program leadership to kind of map outcomes across the curriculum and really look at the curriculum as a whole and think about design strategies or pedagogies or delivery strategies as a whole across that degree. That then is passed down to their team of individual course strategists who work one-on-one with the faculty at the course level to design their individual course within the curriculum.
Interesting. Anyone have a question before she shows some slides of what she's doing? Anyone want to jump in here? And we have a chat window you can use as well.
I do have a question. I just want to make sure that I'm following this, if that's okay. So you're designing these curriculums. Do there necessarily have to be professors to teach them?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So what 2U is an online program manager. We work with universities to help them put their learning experiences online. On the degree side, it's really the university's curriculum, it's their program, it's their intellectual property, it's their whole thing, and they maintain control of admissions, grades, all of those things. They really outsource everything else to us. So from a learning design perspective, I consult with the faculty or consult with the program leadership to help them refine, improve, do it online in ways that they've never done before. But it's really more consultative than it is like generative. And I am not a decision maker. I need to influence and recommend, but I'm not gonna, at the end of the day, it's like the partner can make whatever decision they want to make. And they're teaching it.
Okay. So it's not, you can't look at 2 different universities that you're working with and they don't just have these cookie cutter. Okay.
No,
Okay, I'm understanding now. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because on the degree side, it's that way. Like it's their thing that we're helping them put online and do in the best way possible, and that honors their institutional excellence. In the boot camp side, for example, we create a boot camp curriculum, and partners have the exact same curriculum. So if you go look at a boot camp, like the data science boot camp at Michigan or wherever else, that will all be the same curriculum. It's a very different product.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Nelson, did you want to make a comment? You put a comment in the chat window. Do you want to jump in here and say something?
Yeah, no, I just thought that the placement hours project for social service workers was pretty cool. That you guys were able to make like a way for them to still get their hours, I think volunteer hours, and still get accredited. I know I had some friends doing some of those programs, and during COVID, it got really stressful in terms of how they were going to do that. So that's pretty cool that you were able to work on those kind of projects.
Thank you for saying that. And I will say, like, one of the coolest things about it is that we didn't just find a solution for this pandemic thing. We actually created something that I think is better in many ways. And Josh led on that project. So I don't know, Josh, if you want to talk a little bit about like kind of what we discovered.
I mean, when we listened to our students and our partners, even before the pandemic, there were real challenges with the first year field placement for social workers. Social workers oftentimes like went into those placements not feeling prepared to actually start interacting with clients and placement sites. They had dramatically different experiences between one placement site depending on who the preceptor was. And so we actually had an opportunity in kind of reimagining this first experience for social workers in a way that says, like, how do we preserve all the wonderful kind of like social learning, all the wonderful motivational aspects, all the wonderful like kind of practicing context, like real life world problems that are happening in the social work experience, but also correct for those things that are actually correctable and improvable within a digital environment. And so, that's really what we set out to do. And the feedback from students to date and the data we're getting on that placement is directly a reflection of those things we tried to correct for. So, I think we're doing okay so far. Lots of room for improvement, but that was what we set out to do.
Anyone else? Aaron, you unmuted. Did you want to say something, or Dilnoza has a question?
Just a quick question. Rachel, you said you work with faculty in those universities. Do they also have instructional designers? Do you also kind of communicate or collaborate with those universities' instructional designers?
Yeah, so every partner is a little bit different. We work a little bit differently with them. Some of them do. Some of them have, centers for teaching and learning that are overwhelmed and like just do not have capacity to help as much as they would want. Some of them do have dedicated instructional designers that we work with as well. And so what we do in our teams, and I will say the team that I oversee, I sit in a department of 5 teams. My specific team that reports into me is focused on the analysis and design part of ADDIE, but there are teams that focus on development. And so what we do as a collective of 250 people is we really tailor our approach based on what the partner needs. So if they don't need a ton of instructional design support, fine. Like, we don't need to help you, like we don't need to put you through like the ringer of instructional design kind of thing. But others come to us and like really are interested in our help. So it depends.
Thank you.
I think Patrick and Aaron both wanted to jump in, but Aaron had his mic unmuted for the longer time. So Aaron, you want to jump in?
I actually didn't have a question. I'm using the mute on my microphone, so that's why I'm unmuted.
Oh, you have a comment, Aaron?
No, this is interesting to me. I work for a primarily online college, so it's interesting to see how you've scaled up the kind of the same things. I know that University of Oklahoma is a little bit scattered in terms of the way it does instructional design. Like, we work with 2 or 3 outside partners, and then we also have our own siloed instructional design departments. including my college has one that has 8 people on it, but like we only do our degrees.
Well, Oklahoma's been a leader in the distance learning field for decades, along with Penn State, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Washington. I'm trying to think of what the others. Those are, and Indiana to some degree. Those have been the leaders in teaching alternatively, maybe correspondence, maybe TV based in the old days, talking 1980s.
Yeah.
And especially Oklahoma, they created a collaborative network across the country, and they did a lot to help in the early days of open educational resources. The Merlot project was really founded with the California state system and the University of Oklahoma. And so, you know, you're working in one of the places that is charged with this mission, I think, in some ways. So, you know, it's a good campus too. I like all those statues on the campus. You know, it's a pretty cool place. So Patrick, you had your hand up earlier.
Oh, I just dropped something in the chat. The program Josh was describing sounded super cool. I'm working on for my EDD dissertation paper on how to enhance professional development for like psychology and health professions, so therapists, social workers, other kind of helping professions. And I love the idea of heavy use of like simulations and actually walking graduates through the process. I'm focused more on, I think, in-service or practicing health professions, but would love to chat with Josh and just pick his brain about some things that worked and didn't.
So Josh just popped in and had popped out, so you missed his comment there, that Patrick says for his dissertation, I'm studying ways to use online learning to enhance professional development for psychology and health professions. He'd want to chat with you about it, Josh. So
Pat and I are in touch pretty regularly, so I can connect you too. But it's cool, and it's you know, an evolving frontier for us. I think, you know, some of the next steps there, Josh has been doing a lot of sitting in on presentations from VR companies and AI companies. We actually, it's funny, we met with the folks at Embodied Labs and Storyfile that I read about in 678 with Kurt Bonk. That was actually the first class I took, and I loved it. Take it if you get the chance. But a lot of the stuff that we learned about there, I'm bringing into the workplace today.
you visited the labs or the one?
We didn't visit, but we chatted with the founder, because we're looking at right now this course, the field experience. The asynchronous content is really just video respond, video respond, video respond. But like, we'd love to try to see if we could get kind of an AI character who could adapt to what you're saying or how you're, how you're treating them.
So I am teaching it in the spring, either as blended, like my Saturday class, or as two separate online and face. It will be taught online and face-to-face, whether it's blended or separate courses. Yeah, it'll be Monday nights if it's blended, if the synchronous sessions will be. But yeah, 678 has a 100-page syllabus that I just don't want to update. maybe I'll hire people like Rachel to give some suggestions. I thought about making a blank slate and let students do it over. It's been 2 years. I want to ask a couple more, and I want you to show the slides though. So let me ask one. I have 3 other questions. Okay, I'm a former accountant or CPA. I want to know, are you making money by being commissioned to create the courses? Or do you have different types of models where they might just commission you to develop and then you get out of the way and you let them build and you let them go for it? Do you have another model where you build and you're paid a percent infinitum forever? Do you have both, or do you have one, or do you have other kinds of models that are utilized?
Yeah, it's different because we were 3 different companies at some point. It's a little bit different in the different areas of the business, but primarily our business has been a revenue share. And so we partner over the long term with universities. Like, we sign 10-year contracts because we drop $5 million on day one. And so we go into a huge pit of expense that is only recouped after 5, 6, 7 years. And so, we give the initial investment that the universities often can't do, and then we take a percentage of revenue.
Well, if you can deal with that kind of money, are you mainly dealing with introductory college classes, which tend to be larger than others, or do you deal in graduate courses as well?
So historically, we mostly did terminal master's degrees. So we did things like the MBA and Masters of Social Work, Masters of Teaching, Masters of Nursing, that kind of thing.
The low-hanging fruit, they call it.
And it's a very specific type of partner. Like you go look at our website of the degree programs and it's like Berkeley, Northwestern, Yale, NYU. Like it's a particular breed of partner with a particular level of tuition, I would say.
Interesting. Does anyone have a comment related to the pricing structures? I want to have her show the slides next, but before she shows the slides, anyone have a related question?
And I will say, like, one of the caveats I wanted to give up front was I'm happy to speak to you as classmate and colleague in the instructional design field, and not, I'm not here to sell to you. I'm happy to answer questions very honestly, as long as you don't send this recording to my manager.
and Rebecca looked like she sat up high. Looks like she has a question.
I didn't have another question, but I will be sure to ask if I do.
Okay, Mark, jump in here.
I have a question. My background's more on the military side, so I don't have education, but I was curious, has the company gone into or looked at potentially any like technical fields in trying to do distance learning for, some more technical schools with COVID and everything else like that? Or is it more geared towards what was the traditional higher education schools?
Yeah, our partners are evolving a little bit. And while we did traditionally kind of these terminal masters, we have evolved into the undergrad space. We just started working with our first HBCUs. So we're working with Morehouse and Howard now. We have sort of stayed away from community college and some of the other kind of smaller and lower tuition, although I think in the future we would be interested in sort of expanding. We're also looking at like enterprise, like working with companies on training and things. The acquisition of edX and kind of bringing in the MOOC space to our portfolio and network of offerings really kind of adds to the potential as well. So short answer is not really, but like I wouldn't be surprised in the future.
And as you bring up the MOOC space, thanks. Yeah, EDX. There are articles out there, both pro and con, about what's happened. So I won't put you on the spot in that regard. I know Stephen Mintz personally, who wrote one. You probably have read his piece. And so there are some faculty, some former heads of directors of centers who have a different perspective on what EDX should have done, and that's nothing to do with 2U, but there are, there is some controversy in this space anyhow, which you're well aware of. There's multiple, we can get into all sorts of things. And we could have a debate in Canvas about the direction of the field, but I want you to show your slides. And again, I don't want to put you on the spot for something that really you are.
You're welcome to put me on the spot.
Okay, I'll put you on the spot for one thing. Are you coming to work? I know you come to work remotely, but do you come with a more of pride or smiles on your face as the company's growing? Is there a more positive aura or ambiance because of the reputation that's growing in terms of 2U?
Cautiously optimistic about yes, although I will wait and see what happens. I, like the rest of the world, will wait and see what the company actually does. I know that the sentiment is that we're trying to take a nonprofit out of the market. We're trying to get rid of free education. We're trying to profit off of professors, that kind of stuff. I personally don't subscribe to that. If that's what my CEO does or any of the execs do, like I personally do not subscribe to that. And I joined 2U because I thought that I could have an impact in the world of education and open sourcing education and creating greater access to education for people. And I believe that I will only stay at 2U as long as I believe that that is a possibility, and that is something that I'm doing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really good, I talked to Leanne, the chief learning officer, about this quite a bit. He is saying, we have chosen to back open source, and we want to open source stuff, and we want to open source education. We want to open source any of the research that we end up doing, all that kind of stuff. And that sounds great to me. Like, as long as we actually do that and we use our gravity in the industry to bring tuition costs down and truly make education better, more affordable, more accessible, more equitable, then I will have great sense of pride in working at 2U.
So that was an important question to ask. That's a great answer. And Josh was smiling at several points. It seemed like he wanted to add something to that. No? Okay.
We had a conversation earlier today because we all read that. Do you read eLiterate?
Yep, from time to time. I know that the two people who write for it. Yeah.
So Michael Feldstein posted an article yesterday that is a pretty harsh, well, it's not a harsh critique. He words it very carefully, but he kind of says, 2U doesn't care about learning science, and there's no evidence that learning science is applied in their courses. And it's just like, it's wild to me, because my team and the 250 people in my immediate department, like, we care so much. We try so hard, like the work that we do, and it's just like we do so much to make sure that these courses follow best practices and incorporate learning science to the best of our abilities.
Well, as someone who's been kicked out of learning science, I hope that you incorporate educational psychology. And I don't care about learning science. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Best practices, whether we call it learning science or we call it learning environments.
Yes.
Which I think we really need to move towards, and we have a course on learning environments. So I'm appreciative of that. At your website, do you have any example of best of practices or nuggets or modules that were created to showcase, some of the designs that you've come up with?
Not as much as we probably should, if I'm honest. So over the last few years, we developed something called the Learning Experience Framework, which is a compilation of research principles that exist in the world. It's nothing we invented or created, combined with some of our own experience and examples from some of our courses. So that is available through the website. There's a couple articles that I wrote with the comms teams that highlight 3 different courses and the application of design practices within those designs. But in an ideal world, we would actually be able to let people get in there for free and poke around. And for various complicated reasons, we have not done that.
If you explore it long enough, you'll come up with solutions to that. I mean, at the front end, you often, you got the client privilege and you signed agreements and all that. But there'll be moments at some point where you'll be able to say, well, this is the one that we definitely can put up because the client has gone out of business or whatever, so it doesn't matter. So that does happen. I've seen this in a number of cases. So just keep that in mind for the future. Why don't you show us your slides before we run out of time here?
At this point, it'll take 6 minutes because I feel like I cannibalized all of my talking points in talking to you, but I'll just show them to you for fun. And we can skip through them. Now I'm looking at my talking points. I'm like, what can I skip over? Introducing myself. All right.
Just go for it. It's okay.
I know. Okay. So yeah, as Dr. Bonk said, I'm a student in the online master's program here. I'm currently in 621. I have taken 678 and 511 in the past. I really liked it. I hope you do too. I have been at 2U for 6 years. I started as a learning designer, and now I'm the vice president of learning experience.
Hey, when was that?
Yeah, who knows? Who knows how and why? But somehow here I am.
When was the promotion?
In April, I was promoted to VP.
Congrats.
Thank you. And so for me, I decided to take this master's program though, because I'm pretty self-taught. You know, I've learned a lot over the years and I've done a lot of work to learn, but I really craved that formal path to kind of fill in some of the gaps, to meet people like you and the faculty here. And also because I still kind of believe in the credential of a degree and I wanted to put that on my resume. So, you know, I just wanted to walk you through really quickly kind of how we do instructional design at 2U, which is interesting because it's at scale. It's at the scale of 100 partners and 3,000 courses a year, or you know, whatever it is, it's massive. And so how do you take the things that we're learning about in our degree at the individual level and create a department and an organization of people who can do that with quality and efficiency? So a little bit about 2U, I covered this very briefly, but OPM, online program manager that works with partners to put their learning experiences online. That market is redefining itself right now. You can see a ton of articles out there that we are being described more as a network and a platform, more so than an online program manager. We have grown again since 2008 to today. We have something like 6,000, 7,000 employees. So it's a pretty big operation. And, you know, that operation includes a lot of things. So the value add to the partner is not just learning design and actually creating the program, but we take care of the technology, the marketing, the admissions counseling, the student success, the finance, the operations. All of these things are wrapped up in this service. So that was helpful for me to understand. And just to kind of show you where we sit in the organization, because I think this is interesting to think about as, you know, as you consider future jobs and things and where you want to be, like, where does the learning sit in the org? Like, what does that mean about how much they care about learning or don't care, you know? So we are under the CEOs up top here. This is an abridged org chart, but you can see the learning team sits under operations. And under the learning team, we have 3 different teams that create the different products that we have: boot camps, short courses, and degrees. So I mentioned I oversee one team called Course Strategy, but there are really 5 teams and they equate to 250 people that work to create these courses from start to finish. So curriculum development is really just like an account manager type role. Course Strategy handles the A and the D of ADDIE, right? So we do analysis and we do design. Course development, video production, and course services, they're really focused on the second D, so the development. They're creating stuff, putting it together, launching it. There's a whole other faculty success team that supports teachers in teaching and the implementation, and then we all kind of do evaluation. So my team really focuses on that front-end design and creating the pedagogical architecture of the course. And this is one of the big challenges. How do you have an organization of 5 different teams that work together in the instructional design process? How do you hand off information in a way that is seamless, that allows you to support the partner in the way that you would as an individual designer, right? And that's one of the big challenges for us to continue to figure out. And we care deeply about learning science and principles, despite some of the mentions in the media recently. I will say it's helpful to understand how we think about courses. Most of our courses have synchronous live sessions. So all of our online programs have weekly live sessions in Zoom that are mandatory. All of our courses also have asynchronous kind of self-paced work, which we're all very familiar with. We think about the delivery in sort of a 3-part sequence, often starting with foundational learning that happens in a self-paced way, deepening learning in the live session and sort of building on that stuff, and you know, social learning and getting feedback in real time, that kind of stuff. And then we try to end or close the week or unit with some consolidation or reflection that often lends itself to asynchronous consumption as well. But then, as I mentioned to you earlier, it's this big chunk up front. We actually kind of think about it in 2 separate pieces. One is the stuff that you would think about traditionally as homework. So readings, assignments, that kind of stuff that even if you were in a brick and mortar classroom, you would do outside of the class. But then we carve out this chunk of like 60 to 120 minutes, like an hour or 2 hours, that is like a bunch of little pieces that we have carefully designed and sequenced to kind of walk you through the type of guided and structured learning that you might receive in the classroom. And that can be a series of videos, text pages, questions, discussion forums, any type of content. And we take great care to use our principles to connect to prior knowledge, to prompt reflection, to do all of these things that we know and that you know from reading your first principles are effective in learning. This is like a gross simplification of the process that we go through, but you know, what is a model other than a gross simplification? And this is what we use to communicate to partners. It kind of simplifies it. We strategize, so we figure out the pedagogical architecture of the course. We develop, so we then create to the blueprint that we have created, including filming. We then build it in the LMS and assemble it all. They teach it and we iterate. This takes us, in the past, this has taken us 10 months from start to finish. Talk about pressure earlier, we are under pressure to shrink this. Like we are now actively working to shrink 10 months to 4 to 6 months, because pandemic, everyone did it in 10 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. And they're like, why do I need to spend 10 months with you creating this course? So we are actively working and struggling to close that gap. So this references are the learning experience framework that I mentioned. So the interesting thing about our department is, I mentioned this earlier too, is like it really started as a content department and a video production. And we very deliberately took a hands-off approach to the learning. And we said, you know what, professor, you're the expert. We're just going to help you translate it online. I'm not going to tell you how to teach. Right. And when I started 6 years ago, that was really the tune that we were singing. And over the course of 6 years, things have really changed because our partners are asking us for pedagogical expertise and how to design effective, engaging, efficient, equitable learning. Right. And so we developed what we call our learning experience framework, which is just a framework to unite us all in the same language and principles. It contains 16 principles that are pulled from various different academic sources and research. Many of the things that you will find very familiar, we did not invent it. Again, all we did was put it into a document that we could use to apply in our work. And it kind of gives us this credo that we have united around, which is students learn best by doing. They learn best when they're thinking about what they're doing. And then feelings and attitudes and beliefs can have a real impact on learning. So feel, do, think. These are the principles here. Again, you can go to 2u.com and you can request a download of the 47-page doc with citations and stuff again, and you'll be familiar with a lot of the sources in there. But it's just an interesting, different way of looking at things. Again, I focus on the strategy side, so the analysis in the initial design and architecture. We started
back 2 slides.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right there. So would you call this your instructional design, not model, but approach or philosophy? Maybe philosophy?
Yes. Yeah, I think philosophy kind of hits it closer than anything. It's really like our first principles, right? It's our version of like Merrill's first principles,
which we'll talk about today, actually. So,
yeah.
So good connection between, later discussion from me. And is this possible to get this as a PDF for all of us that I can share with everyone so they don't have to write copious notes on all this?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, great. Keep going. One more. Do you have an instructional design approach or model that you use more than any at 2U? You mentioned ADDIE. Would ADDIE be the kind of the go-to model if you had nothing else?
Yeah, we basically follow ADDIE. We're trying to make it more agile and iterative these days. Right. But classically, it's been pretty ADDIE based.
Okay. And Melissa had a chat. She mentioned in the chat window. Melissa, you want to jump in and mention what you put in the chat?
Yeah, but you touched on it, Rachel, that when I saw those 5 teams, I'm sitting here going, gosh, you must have stellar communication. Because that's, I mean, that's a lot to think about, the communication that you have to have for 5 teams to work together. So that was my comment.
Yeah, it's a challenge, honestly, and I think, I think we could still stand to improve. We have messy we have systems, but we have messy systems, like we do struggle to share information. We have developed tools to communicate a design that a developer is supposed to pick up and create. We still lose some of that in the transfer. So we're actively working to try to continue to improve it, because it's a real challenge. I'll try to burn through this. I know we're getting close to time, but I mean, a lot of this is stuff y'all know. Like when we talk about the design that we do, we think about it in 3 different buckets: inquiry-based discovery. Some of the readings in this class, I love the focus on questions. Like, I think asking the right questions or asking good questions is such an important skill for us. And so that's what we do. We ask a lot of good questions to really understand the underlying nature of the learning that we're seeking to put online. We backwards design it, which is sort of modified from the, Wiggins and McTighe backwards design, and then creative visualization. So I love to keep this element of, we're not just learning and pedagogy people, but we are divergent thinkers, and we're creative, and we're open to finding solutions that no one has found before, and being really creative about how you bring a unique problem online.
Rachel, if you've taken 511 and 578, you should be taking my Saturday class on creativity.
Ooh, I should be.
Yes.
I should be.
Robert's in there, Bob's in there. Next year, if they let me teach it next fall, or the year after. But it's critical thinking, creative thinking, cooperative learning, motivation, and tech integration, but it's really creativity, innovation kind of course.
I love that.
Just thought, it's 8 weeks on a Saturday morning, so it's different than most courses.
Yeah. I will say I think it was as part of either this class or another one. When I read The Design Way, I really feel like that changed my life. And I'm sure y'all will have or will read that book.
So the books we read in that class, 5, 4, 6, are like that. And so they're hopefully to change people's lives, some of the books. Like Ed Catmull's book From Pixar, and how he reflects on the creative process.
Yeah, I have that on my bookshelf. That's funny.
We've got that one, Creativity Inc., that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to keep, for me as a team leader, that's the spirit I want to keep alive on my team. I always want to highlight that.
Yeah, if we all could be sort of Ed Catmull or whomever, have that in our souls somewhere. I think every or most projects will be successful, just because he was an academic at one point, he was in industry at one point, he merged both personas into one from kind of a Buddhist perspective, kind of like Marshall Goldsmith's books, which are also great. And I just reached out to Marshall, and he's endorsed my newest book. So he has a book called Mojo you need to get, another book called Triggers, how you can change your behaviors, another book about helping women succeed, and a 4th one that I've got, Triggers, Mojo, Learning Journeys. So my current book is based on his book, Learning Journeys. It's an edited book of people in HRD space talking about their favorite teacher or their favorite learning episode. And it's a book you can't put down. It's 20 years old, but you can buy it for $1 on Amazon. I recommend everyone buy it. So Marshall Goldsmith, Ed Catmull, there are various people. The woman, Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote the book Eat, Pray, and Love. She has a book called Big Magic. If you get Big Magic, you get Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. You get something by Marshall Goldsmith. You buy Sir Ken Robinson, maybe a couple of his. You throw that all in a mixer somehow, and you'll change your life, really, because you'll have a new perspective on things. At least I think.
Well, and that to me, coming back to the idea of templates, there's so much research, and so many of those books touch on the fact that creativity thrives in structured environments, right? And so template isn't about being restrictive or being a factory or being big bad corporate to you, making you templatize your designs and not have academic freedom. it's about enabling creativity and really focusing in on the areas of real impact and innovation.
Exactly. Now I'll let you burn through your slides.
No, great sidebar. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to design, the actual process of design, we take a backwards design approach, which you'll all be familiar with. We identify outcomes. And again, this is very linear in a way that it isn't often in reality. But we do outcomes, talk about assessments and the assessment strategy. We design learning sequences. We try to focus on the learning first as opposed to the modality first. But, if you've read, the great debates, it's like, can you really separate the learning from the modality and from the technology? So this conversation often happens together. And then we end up with a course map, and I'll show you an example. When it comes to creating those sequences, we leverage a lot of different things. We have to be very flexible because we work with partners who believe different things and have different approaches. So we need to be able to work with them in any approach that they choose, right? We draw on Gagne's a lot, who you're about to talk about as well. This is a simplification of the 9 events of instruction. It just collapses a few of them into bigger buckets: staging, setting objectives and expectations, priming, connecting to prior knowledge and motivating students, building knowledge, presenting the content and providing learning guidance, practicing the skills, getting feedback, and assessment is kind of wrapped up in here. And post-processing is enhancing learning and transfer, right? So reflecting, consolidating, elaborating, all of this kind of stuff. So this is one that we rely on quite heavily.
And this is very similar to Gagne, which we'll go through right after break. So it's very, very, very similar to Robert Gagne.
Exactly.
Or, has components that remind me of Gagne. It's better than Gagne's initial approach, but he constantly remodeled or revisioned his approach over time. And I'm sure it would look something like this had he lived that long, So.
It's just a collapse of Gagne, right? And we've simplified it because part of our challenge is communicating with a range of educators too. Like we work with education programs where we can actually use the geeky words that we want to use. And we work with lawyers who are practicing lawyers during the day who do not care about Gagne's 9 events of instruction, right? But if you can kind of simplify the words a little bit, we can talk at any level. I can tell you feel, do, think, or I can go much deeper into the science of what that actually means.
Yeah.
Getting back to this delivery model, we, in our heads, we kind of know what works well asynchronously and in a self-paced way, connected to some of those ideas. You can stage very easily asynchronously. You can set motivations asynchronously. You can do diagnostics. You can do all of these things asynchronously. We've gotten clear in our heads the types of things that work well in the live synchronous session. So getting real-time feedback, interacting and building, relatedness and community, collaboration, all of that kind of stuff. And then again, we've gotten clear on this kind of third chunk, what works well after the live session, what should you, because we used to just kind of leave it at the live session. But now we've gotten much better at sort of having an activity that brings it home. To me, I think that reflection and the metacognition part of learning is the secret weapon. And so many times students don't do that. And even I, in my classes, I'm I don't want to reflect. I don't have time to write a mind map. But it's literally the more you do that stuff, the better you learn, right? So we've gotten good at anchoring that. All of this gets documented into this complicated multi-tab spreadsheet that I could show you if you wanted to, but it's just a spreadsheet. But it connects to a whole suite of tools that we have at 2U that helps estimate the cost of our courses. We're developing a quality rubric that helps us, in theory, measure the quality of the design of our course, and then other kind of production tools that help us develop and that kind of stuff. And then, so this is our deliverable, the spreadsheet that gets handed off. That's our blueprint. The faculty kind of agrees to what's in there, and then the development teams are off and running, and they're creating it. So that's where I'll stop. Happy to answer questions or leave if you have other things to talk about.
No, we'll take a break shortly, but we have time for a few questions. So we kind of did this the opposite way of what normally this would be done. We did Q&A first and then presentation. So it just shows that the design of our instruction doesn't have to follow a preset model. You know, you can go with inquiry model works when you ask questions first and then show. You know, it gets us thinking about what, you know, what gaps we have in our knowledge, right? So anyone want to jump in with a final question? Everyone's quiet. I have two things that I want to ask. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thanks, Rachel. I was just wondering, so the process, you mentioned it earlier that you wanted to adapt the strategy to be more agile. I was wondering where in that process do you have I guess opportunities for like more formative evaluation or getting learner feedback?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So, and I will say, like, where we are today is because I feel like we were founded by people who came from also the publishing industry. Like, we have a very publishing model, right? It's like 10 months, you create this thing, you publish it out into the world, and then it's gone. And like, we know that we need to like get content in front of students or just be more iterative in producing stuff, getting feedback on it and iterating it. We have been hamstrung by our technology for a long time, if I'm honest with you. We went with an in-house developed LMS for a long time that really made it very difficult to do that. We are deliberately moving towards the industry standard LMSs now with Canvas and Moodle and others, so that we just have greater flexibility to be able to publish more often, to give access to other people more often. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I think Melissa is raising her hand.
Yeah, Rachel, this is kind of a personal thing because what you said early on was you were doing your master's program as a self-taught in the field, and it helps to fill in those gaps. And I kind of feel like I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing an EDD, an EdD, and like I'm reading all these articles and it's all new to me. But I'm doing this. I've been in higher education for 20 years. And so I'm doing this, but now it's like putting those pieces together. And I'm just wondering, when you first started, did you, like, you're spouting off all these authors and all these theorists and all these famous names we're reading about. Did you have that when you first started? Or is that something that's come because you are in your master's or finishing your master's and it's just filling in those gaps for you?
When I first started at 2U 6 years ago, I would not have been able to speak this way. My knowledge and comfort with it started slightly prior to my starting the master's degree, because 2U started evolving in that direction. And I knew that I needed to get up to speed in this stuff to be the leader of the team that I knew this person needed to be. And so I put in a lot of work on my own, like reading articles, like as we were developing the learning experience plan, like I read every source article in that thing. I talked with a lot of people, like I had folks that I would talk things through with, and it helps that it's like, it is practice in context, like it was part of my job and I used it every day and it was like really applied, and I was deeply motivated to learn it. So it has deepened since coming into this master's program. Like I've gotten a lot more of the, you don't know what you don't know, right? And you're just like missing the foundational stuff. So I've gotten a lot of additional stuff out of this master's program.
Okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
Just like takes time, you know. But I like, what was funny to me is like, I feel like there's so many things that I was like, oh, I spent like a year trying to figure that out. And it's like in this textbook that I read, you know, I'm like, oh, I should have just read this book. I guess people have figured this out before.
So it's, you know, you have more incentive when you're working at a place that's talking that language, because you don't want to be ignorant in the work setting that you're in. So you had to ramp up, but as well, you got to learn through this course. So it's a dual, both on the job and within the courses. And I could see you've mastered a lot in just your discussions there. I want thank you, Rachel, but what was the LMS that you used to use? Does it have a name?
Yeah, so we had called it Atrio.
Okay, so I don't know if anyone's heard of Atrio, probably that you haven't. The other question I had was, I was going to ask you describe a failure, but I won't have you describe a failure. You mentioned that you support teachers on the near the back end, near the end of the process. What does that mean, support the instructors to support the teachers?
So there is a department at 2U that is called Faculty Engagement and Development. There's actually a whole branch called Faculty Success, who is dedicated to training faculty in the technology, giving them best practices in not just design, but how to then teach, right? Like what to do in Zoom, like how to facilitate in Zoom, and giving them pedagogical practices for teaching as opposed to the design of a course. They will sit in on live sessions to help provide tech support as needed and provide feedback. They're constantly doing ongoing sessions and seminars. They'll do one-off like training on whatever topic you want if you're interested in like improving your whiteboarding skills in Zoom or whatever. So there's a whole host of stuff.
So is that something, I hate to go back to price, do people pay for that separately, or is it part of the contract?
This is all part of the bundle. And that's really the value. That's really the value proposition of 2U, that it's bundled. The biggest service that our partners get from us, or the most valuable, I would say, is the marketing. We spend a lot on course development, and we spend a lot more, and we resource it and we staff it much more than a lot of other companies in this industry. But what we spend on course development is a drop in the bucket compared to marketing.
And it's something we faculty in our Department of IST struggle with. I'm on the marketing committee often within IST. How do we, what power do we have as little faculty members out there, to market, well, unfortunately I travel around, so I can, but most, it's pretty local in terms of marketing. It's word of mouth. Our programs are pretty much word of mouth. Our online programs are, but there's some marketing. Anyone, I'm done with my questions. Anyone have a final or wrap-up comment? How about Dilnoza, since she's my TA here and she's come extra special for tonight, you want to make a final wrap-up comment? You want to have the last word for this before we go to break?
I want to thank Rachel. I learned a lot, honestly. And I was going to say, Dr. Bonk, even if I'm already third year PhD student, every time coming back to sessions like this, I learn a lot again. It's like reading the book you read again and again, and you find more and more interesting stuff that you didn't pay attention or maybe forgot. So that was a really informative session for me. Thank you so much. I really loved to hear what is happening actually in industry, and that was really informative. Thank you.
Can we give the Vice President a round of applause here? So, it's really wonderful to have you here, and Dilnoza, it's a wonderful wrap up.
Thank you.
Can't thank you enough, both of you. And we've got the Vulcan mind meld, right? Like Bob. Okay, Bob's got the Vulcan mind meld.
Live long and prosper, Rachel.
Thank you for having me. Genuinely, I'm honored, and I'm so happy to come and chat with all of you.
Well, the more you talked, the more I said to myself, she needs to come to 6, 7, 8 in the spring and talk to those students. So, you definitely, we'll think about it anyhow. We're going to take a 10 or 15 minute break at about 17 minutes after 7 Eastern time. So it's 7:30, come back, or shortly after, about 7:30-ish. We'll be back. I'll talk about Gagne and Merrill and Bonk. I don't know who any of those people are, but I'll wing it. Okay. Again, thank you. And I'm going to stop this recording anyhow and throw it up to the cloud, I think.